Today's talk, as the title says, will be about relativistic time dilation and biological quantum entanglement as they relate to autism. And before I start, I wish to thank Mrs. Daniela Mann and her support team for this wonderful opportunity to share my latest research in the field of relativistic time dilation and biological quantum entanglement as they relate to autism. And of course, I wish to thank all the attendees for being here. I've seen that the hall is full with people, and so please stay with me for this hour-long presentation. And another thing that it's important I say before I start, please remember, the contents of this presentation are only for informational purposes. They are not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. And by the way, I know that there are excellent doctors here at this conference. I know Dr. Shaw, I know Dr. Reinwald, I know Dr. Antonucci, Dr. Siniscalco, and I'm sure that they will be able to provide all medical advice you need. Unfortunately, I am on the other side of the world, so this presentation is not meant to provide any medical advice. Now, let's start for real. I fully realize that the talk I am about to give today may be particularly difficult to follow, and I apologize in advance if some or many of the concepts that I shall describe will look abstruse or far away removed from the daily concerns of fighting a disorder as elusive as autism. I know perfectly well what does it mean to fight autism on a daily basis, and I know that today's talk at first sight may seem far removed from the daily fight that unfortunately you have to perform every day. However, I can guarantee you that no understanding and therefore no cure or prevention for autism or for any other disease may be possible if we do not take into consideration the concepts that I am about to expose. Today, as a matter of fact, I will describe our latest achievements in understanding the pathogenesis of autism. So how does autism develop, or why does it develop? And more in general, the role of concepts that pertain to fields that may seem far remote from autism, such as the theory of relativity by Einstein or quantum physics. Actually, we shall find that they do relate very strictly to health and disease. Now, a brief introduction to what it is relativistic time dilation. You may have seen many science fiction movies, but this is not science fiction. This is actually a century-old science that has been demonstrated a number of times. Time dilation, actual difference of elapsed time between two events, as they are measured by observers situated at varying distances from a gravitational mass. In other words, the closer you are to the center of Earth, considering Earth as a powerful gravitational mass, the slower time goes. If you go on top of a skyscraper, or if you go up in the sky on a jet plane or on a spaceship, then you are far away from the center of Earth. And because of this, time runs faster. If you are down to the bottom of the Earth or the center of the Earth, then time runs much slower. So in scientific terms, the higher the gravitational potential, that is, the farther the clock is from the source of gravitation, from the center of Earth, the faster time passes. And Albert Einstein originally predicted this effect in his theory of relativity and was first described in 1907. So we're talking about something that is more than 100 years old. And it was confirmed in the 50s, in the late 50s, 1959. Now, this has been measured a number of times using atomic clocks on airplanes, because airplanes are up in the sky. And the clocks aboard the airplanes run faster than the clocks on the ground. Now, this effect is something so significant that you use it in your daily lives, because I'm sure that whenever you turn your GPS on because you want to find your way back home or to some place you want to go, you may be knowing now that the GPS need to have the clock corrected because the satellites are up in the sky, the car is down on Earth, so time flows in a different way. Up in the sky on the satellites, time runs faster. Down on Earth, time runs slower. And these effects are so strong that they can be measured when the height difference is less than 1 meter. So essentially, if you climb on your stairs now, so you are half a meter higher, time runs faster. If you go down on the floor, time runs slower. And these things can be measured. Actually, this is the paper published in 2010 when they measured the differences in less than 1 meter. Now, in this paper, I write, as a matter of fact, that there is no need to go up in the sky to observe differences in time flow, because relativistic time dilation is observable even at much smaller scales. And as I said, climbing on a chair speeds the passing of time, as demonstrated by that paper. Now, if gravity-induced time dilation is observable at scales measured in centimeters, 50 centimeters, then it's not surprising that it may work at the microscopic level, if not down to the Planck scale, so the smallest possible measurable level. And in the case of the procedure described in my paper, time dilation is to be expected at the level of DNA. So we are able to slow down the passing of time at the level of DNA. Now, before I discuss how relativistic time dilation may affect the properties of DNA and therefore health and disease, I have to introduce two other concepts. One deals with a deeper level of information that is encoded or embedded in DNA. And the second is this elusive concept of biological quantum entanglement. Now, in 1953, you may remember that in Cambridge, England, Watson and Crick demonstrated that DNA contains biological information in the sequence of the bases ATCG. They made numerous movies out of this, and everybody knows by now that DNA contains the genetic information, the genetic code, the information for life. You can call it many times. Many years later, in 2016, Dr. Stefano Terini and myself, while I still was working at the University of Florence, Italy, where I held the chair of molecular biology, we wrote an essay in the Encyclopedia of Cancer, which is edited in Heidelberg by Professor Schwab. And we wrote that DNA may receive, process, retain, and transmit other forms of signals that are signals under the form of electromagnetic waves, radio signals. Because the DNA was demonstrated in 2011 by Blank that works as a fractal antenna. Just like the antenna you have on your car radio, the antenna you have or you had on your TV set, or the antennas you still have on your iPhones. So DNA works like an antenna, and because of this, it is able to receive, process, retain, and transmit other signals in addition to the ATCG described by Watson and Crick. Now, the concept of DNA as an antenna opens fascinating perspectives that go far beyond the field of neurology and oncology. Because, of course, now we have ways to transmit information regardless of the chemistry that is operating at the level of DNA, proteins, enzymes, and all the rest. And the second rather elusive and difficult to understand concept, at least difficult for me, is biological quantum entanglement. Well, this is so difficult to understand that actually Einstein was a fierce critic of quantum physics in general and of quantum entanglement in particular, so much that he called it a spooky action at distance. A spooky truly is a kind of a derogative adjective, but this is the way Einstein felt, because it was so unbelievable even for him, such an effect, that he couldn't believe it could exist. However, it does exist. Erwin Schrödinger talked about entanglement in the same article where he described the famous Schrödinger's cat, the cat that is at the same time alive and dead. And the Heisenberg principle of uncertainty, they all go together, all these concepts. Now, quantum entanglement is something that it is so real that scientists, they use it for many different purposes, such as, for example, sending completely secret messages and making computers faster than ever before thought possible. You probably have heard of quantum computers. They work on entanglement. So we're not talking about science fiction again. We're talking something that is applied or will be applied very soon in our daily lives. And as a matter of fact, quantum entanglement is an area of extremely active research by the physics community, and the effects have been demonstrated with photons. Now, photons, they carry light, neutrinos, a little bit bigger, electrons, a little bit bigger, and then real big molecules, like molecules as big as buckyballs, and the diamonds, the real diamonds that you have on your wedding ring, well, they also show entanglement. But most interesting, I will describe later on how entanglement works with animals and possibly with humans. So we are moving from the so-called spooky action at distance to something that may have an enormous relevance in our daily lives. As I said, quantum entanglement is fascinating in itself, but quantum biology and quantum medicine may be even more fascinating, because the effects of quantum physics have already been observed in biological processes of all types, ranging from human consciousness to photosynthesis in plants, bird navigation, and a DNA function. A good friend of mine, Professor Stu Ameroff, working at the University of Arizona in Tucson, it is about 3 hours southeast from where I'm talking right now, in 2014, so we're not talking about something published yesterday, we're talking about something that is already sedimented, described quantum effects in the understanding of consciousness, and I will elaborate on this point later. This paper, for example, summarizes what we know today about quantum biology. Quantum biology in enzyme function, in olfaction, in photosynthesis, is a magnetodetection, it is a bird navigation. You can download this paper and read it if you like. And the avian compass, so the way birds, pigeons, and all types of birds, they find their way back home, or they find their way toward their destination, is due to quantum phenomena working in their brain. And this is the most striking paper that I happened to read in recent times. Now, please look at the dates. This paper was published on the 15th of February 2018. So today is the 24th of March, so slightly more than 1 month ago. So I am reporting results that I can guarantee you the majority of scientists are unaware of. They don't know these results. And even less they may have understood the implications of these results that were published slightly more than 1 month ago. Now, this will require some deep understanding, and we require some extensive explanation. But let me tell you, let me anticipate that what is written in this paper is so revolutionary that I had to read it 10 times before I was convinced that I had understood it. As a matter of fact, the authors themselves, as you can see here, the authors, they come from prestigious universities in Canada, the McMaster University in Hamilton, and the Department of Chemistry Mass Spectrometry Facility of the Queen's University in Kingston, province of Ontario, Canada. So we're talking about most respectable research scientists. Now, they realize that their results were so striking, so unbelievable, that they write in their paper, at first sight, the results may seem beyond strange. Beyond strange is not much different than spooky. So beyond strange means absolutely unbelievable. But they have robust and well-tested assays that explain, and therefore they urge us to take into consideration their explanation. So what did they do? Now, give me 5 minutes to explain this experiment that is simple and extremely complex at the same time. So essentially, they did 2 experiments. They use fish, first of all. They use two different types of fish, rainbow trout and zebrafish. Rainbow trout is a big trout, the one that you can have for dinner. The zebrafish is a very small fish, but it is largely used in the field of molecular biology because its genome is very well known, so it's an excellent model. These two fish, they are separated by millions of years in terms of evolution. So it is well true they are both fish, but their species very, very much different. This tells you that these events are kind of universal. They don't apply only to one particular strange exotic fish. So these may be universal. So they repeated the experiments several times. They did with both fish. They did a number of control, of course. But let's make it simple. In a tank, they put fish, let's say the rainbow trout, which is bigger and nicer, and then irradiate these fish with ionizing radiations, X-rays. X-rays that we all know, they're harmful, they cause mutations, they may induce cancer, but they also induce some sort of adaptive response. So the fish or the humans, they react to this environmental stressor. They feel that it is harmful, and their DNA does a number of things. It produces proteins and enzymes and all types of defense mechanisms, so to protect themselves from the harmful effects of these ionizing radiations. So they do this in the tank where there are the fish labeled as A. In the tank where there are the fish labeled as B, they don't do anything. They leave the fish in peace. Now, these two tanks are separated in different rooms in the laboratory. There is absolutely no connection. Then, after a while, they put the two types of fish, the irradiated and the non-irradiated, in a common tank. But in a tank, in a container, where there is a mesh divider. So essentially, the fish swim together for 2 hours, but they don't touch each other because there is a mesh, there is a sort of a fence in between in the container. So they simply swim together for a couple of hours. Then they separate the fish again. So those that had been irradiated here, now they go in one tank, and those that had not been irradiated here and have never been irradiated here, never been exposed to ionizing radiations, they go in another tank. Well, guess what? When they look at the biological defensive or adaptive response, they see now that the fish in the tank B, those that had never been irradiated, now they exhibit the same identical genetic, biochemical, proteomic response as those in A. So this is something strange but not unexplicable. It is called RIBE, radiation-induced bystander effect, and has been demonstrated a number of times. So how can we interpret? Let's say these fish here, they have been subjected to the insult of ionizing radiations. They put in place their defense mechanism. Then they come in contact somehow with these other fish that had not been irradiated. And they warn them. They say, oh, look what has happened to us. We have been irradiated. We had to put in place all these defense mechanisms. We suggest that you too put in place this defense mechanism because who knows, maybe the experimenter will want to irradiate you in the future, so you will be protected. So we can imagine that there is this sort of exchange of information. We don't know how does it work. As a matter of fact, whatever information implies molecules that are extremely diluted. Because of this, they talk about memory of water in this paper. You know what memory of water refers to, but doesn't matter. So essentially, these fish here tell to these fish when they swim together, look, this may happen, so you better prevent this. You better employ all your defense mechanism. And so now we see that also these fish that had never been irradiated, they have all these defense mechanisms in place. Well, quite obviously, these fish have an advantage over this, because these now are protected should the experimenter subject them to irradiation again. And thus far, everything is explainable to a certain extent, because we don't know how the fish communicate with each other, but let's say that this is explainable. What truly is spooky or beyond strange is what happened in this other experiment. Same fish, same experimental procedure. In tank A, you have the rainbow trout. In tank B, you have the rainbow trout. None of the two is irradiated. They are left in peace. They are not subjected to any stress. Then they swim together for 2 hours again in a mesh-divided container. Then the fish in tank A are irradiated. And guess what? The fish in tank B that had never been irradiated and have not had any contact with those in tank A after those in tank A had been irradiated, they exhibit the same protective or adaptive response. So how have they done? Have they seen in the future when they were swimming together? Did this fish here somehow knew that they would have been irradiated and told the fish in tank B to be protected as well? Well, this is beyond strange. This is truly spooky. Now, they try to comment this, and they write, however, communication from these irradiated fish, both before, that's a key word, before and after they've been irradiated. And let's describe the role of biological quantum entanglement as it relates to autism. Actually, here I have to mention and thank Dr. Darius Niskalko and Dr. Antonucci, who invited me to the conference that they had in Bari a few months ago, because this gave me the opportunity to write this paper that was published just yesterday. You see, it was published on the 23rd of March. That was yesterday. Thanks, Dario. Thank Nicola. And in this paper, that is downloadable for free, so you can download it and read it at will, I talk about the impact of quantum biology and relativistic time dilation in autism. So please download it, read it, and let me know what you think about it. In this paper, I focus on the issues of self-consciousness and consciousness of the external world, because they are central to the understanding of autism as the very word, the very noun that defines the syndrome implies. Now, the first use of the word autismus in German dates back to 1912, when a Swiss psychiatrist, Paul Bleuler, coined the word from the Greek word autos, that means self, and the suffix ismos, that means action or state. And when they're combined, he intended to mean morbid self-absorption. As far as quantum biology is concerned, according to Professor Hameroff and Sir Roger Penrose from England, consciousness implies awareness, subjective, phenomenal experience of internal and external worlds. You know what does this mean for autismus? This disconnection between the internal and the external world. Consciousness also implies a sense of self, feeling, choice, control of voluntary behavior, memory, thought, language, and, for example, when we close our eyes or meditate, internally generated images and geometric patterns. And I'm sure that you realize that all these is in one way or the other altered in autism: control of voluntary behavior, memory, thought, language, and the internally generated images. But what consciousness actually is remains unknown. In conclusion, according to our research, according to our observation published in respectable peer-reviewed journals, all diseases derive from alteration or misalignment of biological quantum entanglement, whether at the level of DNA, cytoskeletal proteins like tubulin in microtubules, or neurological inside the brain, or social interactions, as we have recently postulated, and I would say demonstrated, for autism.